There are many universes and many Earths parallel to each other. Unlike other universes, people's souls live inside their bodies, but in this world, they walk beside them as animals, which they call Deamon. So many worlds, but connecting them all is dust. Dust was here before the witches of the air. The Egyptian is of the water, and the bears of the ice. In this world, scholars invented an alethiometer, a golden compass. And it showed them all that was hidden. But the ruling power, fearing any truth about their own, destroyed these devices and forbade the very mention of dust. One compass remains, however, and only one who can read it. A young orphan girl named Lyra lives and is educated at Oxford's Jordan College. Because she is young, Lyra's Deamon can change his shape to appear as any animal he chooses. He most often appears as an ermine, or at need a moth or a cat. Adults' Deamons settle into one shape and don't change. Lyra overhears an interview between the master of Jordan College and Francis Pavel, a representative from the powerful and sinister magisterium. They're discussing an expedition to the far north, planned by Lyra's uncle Lord Asriel. Asriel wants to study a mysterious substance, but Francis Pavel pressures the master to withhold his support from Lord Asriel's expedition. The master refuses to cooperate with magisterium. When left alone in the room, Francis Pavel poisons a decanter of Tokay wine that has been decanted specially for Lord Asriel. Lord Asriel soon arrives, accompanied by his Deamon, a snow leopard, and pours himself a glass of the poisoned Tokay, but Lyra emerges from her hiding place to stop him from drinking it. Lord Asriel sends her back to eavesdrop on the meeting that is about to begin. The master and fellows of Jordan College convene to hear about Lord Asriel's proposed expedition and research on dust, which they agree to fund. While listening to her uncle's talk with the college elders, Lyra learns about dust, which in theory is found in the north and is said to unite with parallel worlds. Asriel is sure that dust is connected with a means to get from one universe to other parallel universes. Pavel tells Asriel that talk of dust is heresy. Even before we meet Lyra, boys and girls have been disappearing, snatched off the streets. The children call the kidnappers gobblers. Lyra and her friend Roger promise one another that if either is caught, the other will come to the rescue. That night while Lyra is at dinner, she is introduced to Mrs. Coulter. Meanwhile, Lyra's friends Roger and Billy Costa are taken by the gobblers. At the dinner, Lyra is seated immediately across the table from the master when Mrs. Coulter arrives, accompanied by her Deamon, a golden monkey. The master and all the scholars are evidently in awe of her. Mrs. Coulter takes a seat right next to Lyra, who is most impressed with her new acquaintance and agrees eagerly when Mrs. Coulter says she is also planning a trip to the far north, and proposes that Lyra come along as her assistant. The master is evidently forced by Mrs. Coulter's influence to agree. In the morning, just before Lyra's departure, the master comes to Lyra's little upper room in college and gives last remaining alethiometer, the golden compass. He tells her that it is capable of telling the truth, but he can't tell her much about how it works. He admonishes her to keep the alethiometer to herself and above all not to let Mrs. Coulter know that she has it. Lyra spends some time in Mrs. Coulter's company, going to expensive shops to be bought new clothes and restaurants to dine with posh people. All the while, Lyra keeps the alethiometer with her in a shoulder bag. One day Mrs. Coulter orders her to stop wearing the shoulder bag, and when the girl shows reluctance, Mrs. Coulter has her Deamon strangle Pantalaimon. Lyra runs to her room, now hating Mrs. Coulter, hides the alethiometer, then goes to explore Mrs. Coulter's private study. In a waste paper bin, Pan finds papers which show that Mrs. Coulter is deeply involved with an arm of the magisterium called the General Oblation Board, also known as the Gobblers, and that the General Oblation Board is using children to investigate something called intercision, and that Billy Costa and Roger the kitchen boy are on a list of boys who have been taken. Immediately after discovering this, Lyra catches Mrs. Coulter's golden monkey Deamon trying to steal the alethiometer. Lyra's Deamon changes into a bird and grabs it back. And they both flee from Mrs. Coulter's place. On their run, they are being pursued by the gobblers and they both get captured. Surprisingly, they were rescued by friendly Egyptians, who have been watching over Lyra at Lord Asriel's request. One of their rescuers is Ma Costa, Billy's mother. Lyra travels with Egyptians and becomes acquainted with Jonfa, Lord of the Egyptians, and his advisor Farder Quorum. She learns how to ask the alethiometer questions and how to interpret its responses. She also meets Serafina Pakala, Queen of the Witches, who tells Lyra that she is the subject of a prophecy concerning the fate of the world, that the missing children are being held at Bolvangar in Norway, and that Lyra will find help in Trolesund, a town on the coast of Norway. Meanwhile, Mrs. Coulter has dispatched a pair of mechanical spy flies to locate Lyra. When the spy flies find the Egyptian ship, Farter Coram captures one and seals it up in a tin, explaining that its sting contains a sleeping potion. The other mechanical flies escapes, though it's not clear that it does Mrs. Coulter any good. When they arrive in Trollison, Lyra meets the Texan aeronaut Lee Scoresby, who offers to help her, but first he wants to get a friend out of a jam. The friend is Yorick Burnison, one of the great Panserbjorn armored ice bears of Svalbard. Yorick, exiled from his home after losing a fight, is a virtual prisoner in Trollison. The townspeople got him drunk and stole his armor, which he cherishes the way humans cherish their demons. Now, alcoholic and despairing, he works as a mechanic and metalsmith in exchange for whiskey. Consulting the alidiometer, Lyra learns that Yorick Burnison was heir to the throne of Svalbard until he was betrayed and defeated by the current king Ragnar. She also learns where the armor is hidden and tells Yorick, who promises in return to help her find the missing children. Lee Scoresby and the Egyptians dissuade the soldiers who try to stop the re-armored bear, and Lyra and her allies march into the interior toward Bolvangar. When they camp for the night, Lyra puzzles over something the alidiometer is telling her and seeks out Yorick Burnison. She asks him to take her to a valley nearby, where she finds Billy Costa, weak and anguished because he's been separated from his demon. And now Lyra realizes what intercision means. It's a fate so horrible she and Pan can hardly bear to think about it. Yorick Burnison and Lyra take Billy back to the Egyptians' camp, which is immediately set upon by the ferocious Samoyed people who live in that area. They capture Lyra and carry her to Svalbard as an offering to the armored bears. Recalling that Mrs. Coulter told her King Ragnar longs to have a demon of his own, Lyra asks Pan to hide and introduces herself to Ragnar as Yorick Burnison's demon. As she hoped, Ragnar becomes furiously jealous. Lyra tells him that if he can defeat Yorick in single combat, she will become Ragnar's demon. Ragnar agrees to fight Yorick Burnison, and Yorick gallops up on cue, intending to rescue Lyra. When Lyra explains what she's arranged, apologetic and frightened because after running all that way Yorick seems in no shape to fight, Yorick surprises her with his enthusiasm. He wants nothing more from life than a chance to fight Ragnar, and dubs her Lyra Silvertongue for her skillful manipulation of the usurper king. Yorick fights Ragnar and kills him by feigning an injury, then hitting Ragnar so hard his jaw flies off. This victory wins back Yorick Burnison's rightful place as king of the Ice Bears, but he leaves his kingdom to complete his obligation to Lyra. He takes her most of the way to the experimental station at Bolvangar where the children are being held, but has to leave her and go for help when the bridge over a crevasse breaks, leaving Yorick on the wrong side. Inside the experimental station, Lyra asks Roger to get the other children ready to escape. He shows her to a room where she can be alone with the alidiometer, but she has to hide under the table when the experimental station staff and Mrs. Coulter come in. After Mrs. Coulter leaves, Lyra's foot slips, giving her away. She's captured by the staff and she and Pan are put into the intercision device, the machine used to separate children from their demons. The separation is almost complete when Mrs. Coulter, looking terrified, runs in and stops the procedure. Lyra and Pan wake up with their bond intact, and a distraught Mrs. Coulter assures Lyra that she's safe and she'll never be hurt. Lyra, shrinking from Mrs. Coulter, asks why they're separating children from their demons. Mrs. Coulter explains that dust came into the world long ago when people first disobeyed the authority. While children are immune from dust, it contaminates adults through their demons. The goal of the intercision research is to prevent people from ever being affected by dust. Mrs. Coulter says that intercision doesn't hurt, it's just a little cut.
A little cut.
If intercision is such a good thing, Lyra counters, why did Mrs. Coulter stop the lab staff from doing it to Lyra? Mrs. Coulter admits that the procedure isn't perfect yet. When she mentions taking Lyra home, and she lies about being her mother, and that Lord Asriel is her father. She pretends to cooperate when Mrs. Coulter asks for the alidiometer, but gives her instead the tin holding the spy fly. The fly's sting knocks out Mrs. Coulter and her demon. Lyra escapes and leads the children out into the snow, pausing only to sabotage the intercision device, which explodes in a very satisfying way. Outside the experimental station, the children confront the guards, who attack them. Yorick Burnison intervenes but is nearly overcome before the arrival, at dramatic intervals, of Lee Scoresby, the witches led by Serafina Pakala, and the Egyptians. There's a ferocious melee. Whenever someone is killed, their demon disintegrates in a swirl of dust. Lyra's friends win the battle. Lyra sets off with Yorick Burnison and Lee Scoresby to find Lord Asriel, who has been captured by the Samoyed people, and Roger also insists on coming along. Meanwhile, Mrs. Coulter, having learned that Lord Asriel has bribed his captors and set up a laboratory to continue his research on dust, Mrs. Coulter sets off to stop him. In the final scene, Lyra and Roger curl up with Yorick Burnison in the back of Mr. Scoresby's flying machine, as they all head north to help Lord Asriel.